I am Dr. Swannie Jett, and I have a passion for public health for over 30 years. Now, I'm in a position to affect change. And these are the critical conversations about health in our community with the people who can help me make those changes. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. This is CEO Live Talks with Dr. Swannie Jett. And today I have a good friend with me, Mr. Brett Bachman. Welcome to the set, sir.
Always a pleasure to be hanging with you, sir.
So, customarily I start off with, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, and your family.
Okay. It's quite interesting. So I was born in Santa Monica, California.
Okay.
Back in 1972. And it was a great time to grow up in California and in Los Angeles. My mom and dad were totally from opposite places. My dad grew up here in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Mom grew up in Los Angeles and Bel Air.
Okay.
And so they met.
Quite different.
Yes. My dad in Kentucky wound up going into the entertainment industry. Was a Korean War veteran, but was in the entertainment corps in the Air Force and got to know like Marilyn Monroe and Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. And then when he got back from the Air Force, he went to UK, was a cheerleader at UK, and then went to Los Angeles where he met my mom, married me, became an actor. So I grew up in the entertainment industry on movie sets and TV sets, mm-hmm. and it was the magical time for me. It was amazing.
Any brothers and sisters?
I do. I have a brother here, and my dad has 4 children. There's my brother and then I have another brother here that he had when he was living here back in the day, mm-hmm. and then a sister as well. Now, all 3 of my brothers live here in Louisville,
oh, wow.
And my sister still lives in Los Angeles. And it's been great. My brother has now 3 kids, so I have 3 nephews. Okay. I got married right before the pandemic. You and I were discussing. I finally was able to take my honeymoon, and it was an incredible trip, really once in a lifetime that we were able to do. It's been amazing. So I have a little girl, Emma, who mm-hmm. actually I just got back from being with her because she went roller skating and decided that it was a good idea to have a spiral fracture of her tibia. So we're working through that right now.
Yeah, that's not good. So growing up in a house with a father that's in the entertainment industry, how was that?
To me, it was normal.
Okay.
And like I come back here and talk about it in Kentucky, and everybody says, "Oh, you grew up in Los Angeles," and
right.
and then they, but having actors coming over and run lines, going to movies. So I was on a movie with him that he did called Tremors, mm-hmm. and so I got to be on set and watch my dad get eaten by a worm. And so, and I didn't find anything. And he tells this story. He was in a series called Tales of a Gold Monkey, and he had torn almost every cruciate in his knee.
Wow.
And back then, if you couldn't show up, sometimes they wrote you out of the series. So he waited and just duct taped his leg so he could make this scene. And he goes in, and it's this whole thing. And I'm sitting up on a 20-foot ladder looking down into the set with the wind and the rain and all. And he finishes the scene, and I'm like, "Dad, good job."
Right.
And he goes from there to surgery. Now the series wound up getting canceled. It only lasted for a year. Right. But just doing that kind of stuff, going to when my dad, hearing the stories about old Hollywood and how he got to know Marilyn Monroe and, all the different things. He's 90, almost 91. It was an incredible childhood. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody has their issues during childhood. Right. I had many of my own.
Right.
I was kind of a wild child. Like I was telling my...
Don't say that. You wasn't wild. Just say it ain't so.
I was because I broke my arms, one leg, and just doing crazy stuff. That's what I told Emma. I said, "Don't follow in my footsteps." Right. So it was great. I had a lovely childhood.
So how did you go from being in the house entertainment and then you went to high school and decided to play sports?
I did.
Right?
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well, I started out as a swimmer, Okay. And I was, when I was swimming, I was born with scoliosis. Okay. And by the time I was like 8 or 6 or something, I had a really bad curve. And my parents took me into old school orthopedist who said, look, there's 2 things that we can do here. Put rods in the back, straighten it out, or why don't you try swimming? So mom enrolled me in a swim team, and I was on a swim team from 6 to 14. Okay. And just solid swimmer, but then I decided I wanted to, play a little football. And, got injured, all other stuff, and decided, I went to college, tried to do that again, decided football wasn't for me, and the coaches all decided it wasn't for me as well. Let's just be real.
Walk me to that story, because that's a fascinating story.
Well, I was trying.
Because you was playing offensive lineman, right?
I was trying to play offensive line for San Diego State. Okay. Trying.
That's a good school.
No, it was a really good school. Right. I was trying out. I was, trying to do the red shirt thing. Thought I had some talent. Didn't. I had some heart. And my dad's friend is a gentleman by the name of Russ Bollinger. And he played pro football. And I met him when he was actually doing a play with my dad when I was like 9. Okay. 6'7", ginormous, 300-pound guy, And so I was talking to him, and he was like, if you don't have the talent, you're going to need medical care when you get out, and you're most likely not going to go play pro. And it was like soul crushing, but it was real and honest. So I learned to surf. Okay. And then wound up in the 6-year plan at San Diego State, which was pretty unique plan because I enjoyed college immensely.
I did too.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, I feel bad for people going to school today in college, because you cannot make mistakes because it's forever imprinted in any kind of digital video.
That is
we were able to make mistakes in college, right? And especially young men, we make lots of them. Right. We try not to make them as adults, but that happens. Yeah. And so I think that that I don't know how that generation is working through that. I'm sure that they are. Sometimes I have to have discussions with some of my team that, look, when you take a picture and send it, it's forever. Right. I mean, I have that with my daughter now, who's 11. She has her first cell phone, and it scares me.
Yeah, that is interesting, because we could make mistakes. High school and college. Yeah. And nobody has film, video, picture, right, to say, you can't get this job because you did that.
Right. Right. And the thing is, people evolve over time, so people make mistakes. Right. I think some of the conversations I have with some of the young, very talented individuals I have on the team, they're so afraid of making mistakes. Right. And for me, I didn't start out as a CEO. Right. I was a bouncer in college. Right. All right. And then I wound up running a restaurant and a bar. And then from there, I ran a more professional restaurant called Houston's, which is a steakhouse, high-end.
Great place.
Great training program, amazing training program for management. But I used to be able to manage at different restaurants, and every time I left one restaurant, went to another, all the mistakes I made, I left. And so I grew as a leader and as a human being by making mistakes.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dan, and welcome to the Real Vaccines of Pardon DuValle, Season 3. Today, I have 2 vaccines that have some unfinished business. Everyone, welcome to the stage, the wonderful flu and COVID vaccine. So, flu vaccine. Let's start with you. What exactly is the issue?
I just think the flu vaccine should be available to all PDCHC staff and patients. I mean, it's flu season, so COVID is not really important no more.
See, this is why we have an issue. People need my updated monovalent vaccine to protect themselves from the newest strain of COVID that came out earlier this year.
Wait, but y'all do know that Port DuValle actually offers both vaccines, right?
Are you sure we offer both vaccines? Because according to the pharmacy, only the flu vaccine is available right now. And do you need insurance?
Yes, flu vaccine, that is correct. Park DuValle offers the vaccine daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at all our pharmacy locations. And on other days, you can get the flu vaccine from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at your nearest PDCHC site.
Do you need an appointment for this?
No, you do not need an appointment either. The dates and locations are on the website. Go to pdchc.org to find out more information.
Yes, I'm glad everyone is on the same page now. If anyone has any further questions, you can reach pharmacy at 502-772-5029. Be sure to tune in for season number 4.
Hi, my name is Swannie Jackson. This is Shakoya Gurton, and we're both medical assistants here at Park DuValle Women's Health. We specialize in pregnant women, mammograms, ultrasound, and any vaginal complaint. So we offer free pregnancy tests. We offer glucose testing for our patients who are 27 weeks pregnant. We offer mammograms if they need one, if they find any lumps in their breast, and we also offer ultrasound if there's any abdominal pain or a pregnant patient. It's important for our women to keep up with their bodies because if they was to have a lump in their breast and they don't perform monthly, everyday breast check, it could be a lump there that may need a mammogram, and we could catch it just in case it's cancerous. You can contact us at pdchc.org, or you can call 502-774-4401, extension 1142.
So tell me, because before you get into running the restaurant, because that's fascinating to me, you went to school and got a degree in what? Because that's the thing right there.
Yeah. I changed my major many, many times.
Okay.
Started out in microbiology.
Okay.
Organic chemistry threw me out of the loop.
That's a great class. I took that.
And I didn't have the mentality for school at that time. I wasn't serious about it, hence the 6 years. But I wound up graduating with a psychology degree with a minor in sociology.
Okay.
And I found sociology fascinating, studying world religions fascinating, about how they evolved, what they did, how the human mind works, and all kind of dovetailed into being able to manage people.
Right.
And that degree, I'm glad that I did it. You know, there weren't that many job opportunities for that degree afterwards, kind of like some of the degrees that people get out with now.
Yep.
But I made it work.
And then you got student loans to pay for that?
Well, back when I went to college, it was only $380 a semester.
Oh, yeah.
It was a state school.
That is true.
And now I don't know how much it is, but
it's
I know
ridiculous
it's more.
now.
Yeah, I know.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you graduated, and then what? Because you couldn't do anything with that.
No.
that degree.
So I wound up becoming the head bouncer at a nightclub.
Okay.
And then that nightclub went bankrupt and closed down. But one of the clientele that used to come in there quite often was a manager at a fast and casual restaurant. And so he said, "Would you like to come here?" And I didn't even have to have any training. I just walked right in. Okay. And I did that for about 10 months. And during that time, I was able to dig into the numbers and help kind of convert it. And through that, I met another person and got recruited to work for Houston's restaurants. And I went up to, I did training. Their training program was insane, 6 months, where you pretty much have to run every single position during the busiest time. Okay. And once you're done with all that training and the kitchen training, you have to be able to walk into a position and run it. Okay. And for me, that training taught me a lot on work ethic and what to do, and also organization, how to organize others. And there are some things that I miss about the restaurant business. There's a lot I do not. It's tough, it's grinding, but kind of like on a athletic team. And you felt this, when everybody's firing at their position and everybody is just working at 120%. You can see it. And then you can see and you can feel it. Yeah. And there's not a better feeling on that. And we would get that in the restaurant when all of a sudden we got a wave of 150 or 200 people. And we're calling tickets and we're doing this. And I'm like, this, and you're running it. You're organizing everything.
Everybody know their role.
Yeah. And I think that was the only sense that I would ever have of what like a quarterback feels on a football team. Right. But it was amazing. I transitioned from that because, well, two reasons. I mean, there was a light and airy reason. I wanted to travel some more and have some summers off. So I said, let me go back to school. And I took the LSAT and I did really well and wound up going to Michigan for law school for my first year. But after a year in the snow, I was like, this is
Can't do it.
Met some really great friends who I'm friends with today. And then wound up going and finishing my law degree in Pepperdine. And then I went from that to get my master's in conflict resolution and did a year living over in London. And then I worked at in the international criminal courts at The Hague.
So that's interesting because you've made some shifts in your life, and some of it you didn't have control of. Right?
Yeah.
So what allowed you to be able to make and adapt and be able to make that shift? Because it had to be something in you that drove you to say, okay, this is my faith. I'm going to accept this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make this shift.
I didn't realize it when I was younger, but more faith in God and myself. And the older I've gotten, the more I've come to realize that there was a plan, and you just have to accept it and follow. And so for me, again, all different careers. Now, when you're managing people, you could be in a manufacturing plant, or you could be a CEO in a $1 billion company.
Right.
It's all the same.
Right.
Just different ways of doing things. And so one of it, the best way I can explain it is I've done 2 marathons in my life, and you look at me and you say, that's not a marathon runner.
I wouldn't say that, sir.
I know, out loud. But when I said I ran 2 marathons, the first thing in your mind was like, huh? And so it's okay. We can be real here, all right? And so, and I'm sitting there and I tell everybody, anybody can do a marathon. Anybody. It is 100% will. It is being stubborn and making your body do it. I mean, I remember when I finished my first one and I was running it or walking it with I was at an organization that was taking care of kids that had Down syndromes all the way up to like 50 years old. Okay. And we had one, and she was the oldest woman with Down syndrome that ran a marathon unassisted. And so we started together. She finished before me, ran back to me and helped me finish.
Wow.
So part of that is the will of just making your body do things. And I think it's the same thing that I do in work. I always tell people I've never failed at anything in my life. And the reason why I haven't is because I never stop.
Right.
You only fail when you quit. Right. And that's the only time you will. Other than that, you just keep going and you learn from every mistake until you get better. It's like sharpening a whetstone every time you do it.
It's interesting. You also made some very strategic shifts.
Yes.
Because going to law school was strategic. But you have landed jobs through relationships. So talk about that.
Relationships mean everything. Like one of my habits, I've been here now 10 years, 15 if you count before. I've lived here 10 years, but I've been coming back here 15 years. When I started at Heuser, I still go through every one of my emails that I've ever sent since I've been here once a year.
Okay.
To reconnect with people, to understand people. And people can sense if you're interested in them for who they are.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why I loved my experiences going back in college. Yeah, I started law school later and all that stuff, but going back in college as a bouncer, understanding and being able to talk to anybody from all walks of life and understanding them in all phases of sobriety, and then restaurant management, all that was intense management experience. And so you develop those relationships, and then I'm curious about people. So I don't really let go. I always say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And then when things happen where you can reach out to people and say, hey, can you give me some advice on this? What do you think? And then they start to make connections for you.
Right.
They do that because you're friends.
Right.
You're not calling them to say, hey, can you go get me a job? Can you do this? They want to do it because during that time, you've been interested in who they are, what their families are. Now, it's work, okay? But the rewards on it are so much greater than the effort it takes to maintain them.
We are here in the community. We partner with our community health workers to run vaccination clinics throughout the city of Louisville, specifically downtown and the West End. The importance of events like these is that a lot of people have transportation issues, so we are able to come out into the community and get people the vaccinations that they need.
So it's really important to have these type of events in the community because, you know, as we know, when COVID and flu season comes around, our underserved communities are hit the hardest. So if we can bring any vaccines or anything that they need, glucose testing, it's important to meet people where they're at.
At Park DuValle, we care about the community. We do events like this monthly because we are the community and we love to give back to the community.
Be sure to visit our website for more of our upcoming community outreach events.
For more information, visit us online at pdchc.org.
Hello, my name is Sierra Clark and I'm the Chronic Disease Manager at Park DuValle Community Health Center. Ever since I started at Park DuValle over 9 years ago, I have been committed to helping patients live healthier lifestyles. I am currently serving patients in the Chronic Care Management Program, or CCM program. My team and I help patients manage their chronic conditions such as obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. In this CCM program, you will receive several benefits to help you manage your health. We offer monthly telephone calls to check in with your progress and to assist you with any concerns, assistance with scheduling your healthcare appointments, and assistance with filling your prescriptions in a timely and convenient manner. We also offer many resources to help you with the barriers you may face with eating healthy, being physically active, or monitoring your conditions at home. For more information, visit us online at pdchc.org or visit one of our health centers.
A lot of people, they want to connect. Right. They see you out in public. Right. And they want to have transactional relationship.
Right.
See, I don't do transactions.
I don't either.
Right. So you have to build a relationship, and people notice. They say, well, we see you walking around, you talking to everybody knows you. I'm like, well, I don't know if everybody knows me, but I do talk to people of all walks of life.
Right.
Right. So you never think you're too better than somebody else.
No.
And sometimes people get in positions and they think that.
Yes.
Which that's the wrong answer.
It is, because the climb up and the climb down, everybody goes through it.
Everybody goes through it.
And you're coming down, you know, or around. I will say this, you know, part of my dad's different my mom's family and my dad's family. Mom, her heritage goes all the way back to the Mayflower.
Okay.
And she grew up with a chauffeur in Bel Air. My dad grew up in Louisville, very humble means.
Right.
And so but my dad, strong work ethic. Mom had one too, but dad could work around the house and do things, because on a farm, you do that kind of stuff.
You gotta do that.
And so I grew up that way, seeing both worlds.
Okay.
Seeing some of my grandparents, friends, and family that looked down on other people because they had people that worked for them and, you know, seen and not heard, that kind of stuff. And then seeing my dad, you know, going out there, making friends, being the light of the world, doing all that stuff. And, but so when I am around people that are in high positions of power or have $1 billion or so, I don't treat them any different.
Right.
I don't at all.
Right.
Because money and power doesn't make you who you are.
Right.
You are who you are. And I can talk to somebody that is going through down times and try and help and go through it. And I will tell you that the person who has all that money is going through the same human issues across. It crosses all socioeconomic status.
I had somebody say something to me one day. It was quite interesting. There was a fire chief, and they retired.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they struggled because they didn't know who they were. The title defined them.
Yes.
And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, so you mean to tell me if you're no longer the fire chief, you didn't know who you were outside that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you kind of have some baseline of who you are, despite a title. Titles come and go.
Yep.
Like, who are you as an individual?
Agreed.
And can you redefine who you are over time?
Right.
And people who are able to do that are able to shift to different careers. Say for you, because you started in law. And so tell me, why did you shift from law? Because you had a pretty good career going.
I did. You know, it got to a point, so I represented parents who had special needs children, generally against the local school district, which at that time was LA Unified. And it's a monolithic, huge school district. And so kids sometimes can get lost, especially kids with special needs. And socioeconomically, parents who have money would hire lawyers.
Okay.
And then they would be able to make sure that everything that they need to have for that child's education, they would be able to get.
Right.
When I was working at Pepperdine, I became the associate director of their special education department. And what we quickly realized was there's a lot of people that had no money that needed the same kind of services. It's a difficult thing because public school, I think, needs to be improved a bit. I think that they do amazing with what they have, and they're trying.
Right.
You know, it's above my pay grade to know whether a school district is too big or too small.
Right.
I don't run those numbers. I know that sometimes when you have a large organization, you know, you're in the military, so you know that you become a number.
Right.
And that happens in school districts sometimes. And so I think that it was my job to help those who couldn't advocate for themselves and their children. And especially when it came to minority populations, socioeconomic challenged populations. If their parents didn't know how to navigate the school system, then their parents' didn't know how to do it. And you know, you go back far enough and they didn't, then how are they expected to know to be able to go in and talk to an administrator and say, actually, my child should have more speech, or my child should have this in order to make his academic goals. And so I did that for 7-8 years. And the difficult part was it just wasn't changing. You know, it was my personal opinion. It was easier just to handle the cases that came in, and rather than do a systemic change, because there's so much to do in a systemic change. And so when I decided that I was going to retire, for lack of a better term, you know, I'd been working with my dad in Louisville on the film festival that we put on here. And that's how I got to know Louisville. You know, my law degree, and I would never give that up. It's a powerful thing to know and understand the law, and sometimes you forget how powerful it is, because every time I read a contract, or every time somebody says, well, all right, well, that's not the way what it says.
Right.
All of those things, it gives you a little more security. It also gives you the ability, like when I'm navigating my own doctors and medical, and that's why, you know, what we're doing now is hiring healthcare navigators to help people who really don't understand if their child's diagnosed with hearing loss, where do they go?
Right.
What do they do? How do they do things? And so that's part of what we're doing now with Heuser. But transitioning from the law was more about the disappointment of me not being able to do systemic change, even though I had hundreds of clients and were able to affect change for them, but just couldn't, you know, I was ready for another challenge.